welcome aboard.
Please welcome to the stage JP Morgan Chase's Tim Berry.
Well, thank you, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Tim Berry, as the voice of God said. I am the Global Head of Corporate Responsibility and the Chairman of the Mid-Atlantic region for JP Morgan Chase. And we are incredibly excited to have you all join us here today. This is the kickoff event for our new partnership with Axios and the U.S. Conference of Mayors, focused on lifting up insights to help drive economic growth at the local level. Before we dive into the program, though, I just want to give a bit of important background behind this partnership. For more than a decade, JP Morgan Chase has pioneered a model for corporate responsibility that brings together our company's philanthropy, government relations, research, policy, sustainability, and public engagement functions. We operate at the nexus of business, policy, and philanthropy. We tap a wide-ranging set of tools and perspectives to deliver for the communities we serve. We do this because we believe that the strength of our company is inextricably linked to the vitality of communities. We know that when families do well, we do well. When communities thrive, JP Morgan Chase thrives. So we're not just committed to supporting communities, we are literally built for it. With team members around the globe, we partner with local residents to understand what's happening on the ground and how JP Morgan Chase can use our unique expertise and resources to maximize impact. Recognizing that there's no one-size-fits-all approach, our local strategies are informed by global insights and intentionally tailored to local context, whether that is a region, a neighborhood, or even a city block. We started developing our unique model more than 10 years ago when we made a historic $200 million investment in Detroit's economic recovery after the city filed the largest municipal bankruptcy in U.S. history in 2013. This was one of our most comprehensive and integrated business and philanthropic investments to date, and we learned a lot of important lessons along the way. You'll hear about those lessons shortly from JP Morgan Chase Vice Chair Peter Scheer and Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan. But the reason I'm calling attention to them right off the bat is because it's this work and this framework, inspired by what we did in Detroit, that has helped inform our company's commitment to communities around the world, including many you in this room call home. From San Francisco to right here in DC, we have expanded our business while making investments aligned with local needs and priorities to create economic opportunities. In every community we serve, we strive to apply our expertise, insights, and resources to address economic and societal challenges. No two communities or their challenges are alike, but we have consistently found that in places where public officials, nonprofits, private sector companies, and other community leaders are working hand in hand to solve problems, anything is possible and everybody wins. At the end of the day, our goal is to spark long-term, self-sustaining economic growth by helping communities develop strong commercial and residential infrastructure that will ultimately attract new talent and investments. And so it is with a sense of purpose and mission in mind that we're launching our partnership with Axios and the U.S. Conference of Mayors to advance insights that can be replicated and scaled to tackle systemic issues in communities around the country and around the world. Following today's kickoff event, we're excited to host similar convenings in Chicago, Austin, Columbus, San Francisco, Boston, and Atlanta throughout this next year. Our conversations will focus on issues that drive inclusive economic growth, including fueling business growth and entrepreneurship, supporting neighborhood development, preparing the next generation of America's workers, and expanding economic mobility. We'll share learnings from successful programs and the impact we've achieved in communities globally with local leaders and experts who are looking to institute sustainable solutions, including all of you with us here today. So let's jump in. Mike Allen, co-founder and executive editor of Axios, is going to kick off our program with our great Columbus mayor and U.S. Conference of Mayors president, Andy Ginther. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll hear from JP Morgan Vice Chair Peter Scheer and Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan, who will speak with Axios publisher Nick Johnson. Thank you all for being here. We're really excited to kick this off today.
Please welcome to the stage Axios co-founder Mike Allen.
Thank you very much, Tim. I'm Mike Allen, co-founder of Axios. Thank you so much for joining us. We're very honored to be on the sidelines of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, along with some of my Axios local colleagues, which we appreciate. Excited to be here. Axios loves mayors. The worse Washington does, the more important you are. And so this is exciting for us. I was just chatting backstage. More than 1,000 people are going to be here for the 93rd conference of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, 270 mayors. So very exciting turnout. We thank JP Morgan Chase, Peter Scheer, and Tim Berry, and all their colleagues for being kindred spirits in their interest in local and how prosperity can come. JP Morgan was a day zero believer in Axios. Tim Berry actually is an Axios alumnus as a former colleague, so it's fun to be on this stage together. We appreciate JP Morgan Chase's partnership, and we appreciate the Conference of Mayors. For those of you who are turning in on the live stream around the world, we appreciate you, and please follow along with the hashtag Axios Events. I'm excited about our first guest, who is living the dream. He grew up as a graduate of Columbus City Schools, worked as an intern at the Carter Center, was a leader in private nonprofits, is now in his third term as mayor of Columbus, Ohio, and is president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. Andy Ginther, Mr. President, welcome to Axios. Thank you so much for joining us. It's so grateful to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Term 3.
Yeah.
Backstage, I was jokingly said to you, when you're mayor, and I came up through local news, one of the reasons I'm excited about Axios Local, I covered the mayor of Alexandria, among other mayors as I was coming up. And I was saying to you backstage, when you're mayor, there's no one to blame. And you said,
if you blame anybody, you don't last long if you're the mayor.
It's good
People hire mayors to solve problems. And we always like to say there are three kinds of folks in America: Republicans, Democrats, and mayors. Because at the end of the day, there's not a Republican way or a Democratic way to pick up the trash, plow the streets, create jobs, make neighborhoods safer.
And that's a fascinating backstory. The U.S. Conference of Mayors is nonpartisan. You are a Democrat, and you will be followed by
a Republican, David Holt, the great mayor of Oklahoma City, and he will be succeeded by Todd Gloria, a Democrat from San Diego. We're one of the last bipartisan organizations left in the country. It's something we're really proud of, and as you can imagine, in today's climate and environment, you have to be real purposeful and intentional and committed to making sure you protect that.
No question. Mayor, before we plunge in, I mentioned that you were an intern at the Carter Presidential Center in Atlanta. The United States is still in a period of mourning for former President Carter. I wonder if you could just share a quick memory.
Well, I was incredibly honored to represent the U.S. Conference of Mayors at the funeral. And it brought back so many memories. One of my favorites is there were a group of us. The Carter Center internships were some of the most competitive unpaid internships in America. And so a group of us, as you know, President Carter taught Sunday school for a number of years, and a group of us all pitched together, pitched in, $5 or $10 for gas money, and drove to Plains from Atlanta one Sunday for a Sunday school lesson.
Oh, I'm so jealous.
So there were about 10 of us. And at the end, President and Mrs. Carter came over, talked to us, spent some time with us, and then knew we were broke and were probably hungry. And so, as you know, Mrs. Carter grew up a Methodist. And there was a spaghetti supper to raise money for their youth group at the Maranatha Methodist Church. And they invited us to lunch. So here we are, having lunch with the former President of the United States, his wife, and of course, his one Secret Service agent that was assigned to him. And after we finish up our spaghetti lunches on paper plates, the former leader of the free world cleared our plates, cleaned up the table, so that we could continue on with our conversation with Mrs. Carter. The next time we see him, he appears with the biggest piece of pie that I have ever seen in my life. He put it in front of his wife and told her, "I'm sorry, I couldn't find anything bigger." Put one down in front of the Secret Service agent and kindly told the rest of us we were on our own. That was one of my greatest memories.
Stuck the landing.
Yeah.
That is a great story there. So Axios always starts with the news. And this morning when I opened my Axios Columbus, and their boss, Holly Moore, is sitting in the front row here, we had the news that Anduril Industries, who's one of the great disruptors, up-and-coming innovative defense companies, will build Arsenal One in Columbus, Ohio. Tens of thousands of autonomous vehicles, sensors and weapons will come out of that factory. Take us behind the scenes. How long have you known, and what does it mean for Columbus?
It's a game changer, one of the largest economic development projects and job creation opportunities in the state's history. And I think it shows again, we always talk about the Columbus way. We think we do public-private partnerships better in Columbus than anywhere else in the country. And a lot of that work is geared around our partnership effort. The Columbus Partnership is a large group of private sector leaders and major employers in the community that work on large, significant civic issues. And they decided probably about 15 years ago that we needed an unprecedented effort around economic development and job creation. And so Columbus 2020 was created. It evolved over time, especially once we got past 2020. It's now One Columbus, and it's a regional economic development organization that works with Jobs Ohio, which is the state's economic development organization. And we work hand in hand because oftentimes it takes great sites, but it takes workforce, it takes infrastructure, it takes water, in the case of Intel. And so all of us, even though this is going to be in Pickaway County to our south, Intel is actually not going to be in Franklin County where Columbus is, but they needed our water to make Intel happen. And so it's all regionalism, and we think the communities that are growing and thriving around the country, and I would argue the world, are ones acting regionally.
And a question for my colleagues in Axios Columbus. Your smart brevity, one sentence on why Columbus.
We have the best people, and
but a lot of mayors will say that. Let's be super specific. Why did Anduril ultimately sign for Columbus?
I think because of workforce,
Yeah.
and because of talent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now you talk about Columbus as America's opportunity city, bringing both equity and prosperity. What's the key for other mayors, the 269 other mayors who are going to be here? What's the key to being both seen as and being an opportunity city?
Well, I think every city has incredible stories, and I think you're blessed to have Mike Duggan, who I think is one of the best storytellers of mayors, and he has an incredible story to tell of his leadership in Detroit here today, and Mayor Rickman of Columbia, who's a dynamic new mayor of Columbia, South Carolina. We're going to have well over 270 mayors here this weekend. Over 20% of them, this is going to be their first meeting or their new mayors. And so we're going to be really focused on making sure they feel welcome, accepted, connected. We're going to really raise their profiles during this meeting because we're always focused on the future. And we believe that one of the best things we can do as a conference is to have our mayors engaged, to making sure that we're focused on relevant information and material and best practices that mayors can use and learn from each other. We also, as you can imagine, over the last couple of years, have become one of America's largest support groups because it's nothing like dealing with a pandemic, a racial reckoning, police and community issues, and a spike in violent crime. But America's mayors have led the way. We now have some of the biggest reductions in violent crime in cities all over America because of the leadership of mayors working with their police chiefs and their communities to make their communities safer, not to mention all of the incredible investments that have been made by the federal government into infrastructure, into the rescue plan and other things that have helped us really in Columbus, we've taken a comprehensive approach to making our communities safer, investing in prevention, intervention, and enforcement.
I slacked my Axios Columbus colleagues for a little smart bomb before this, and I know that a big issue for Columbus is housing. I know a big issue here at the 93rd winter meeting of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. It's going to be a big issue. And a point that you and your colleagues at the conference make to me is this is a national problem, needs a national solution. How do you get that? How do you help propel that out of here?
It is not an issue. It is the issue. And you talked about all that great economic news, and I shared on Intel and all the other great things happening in Columbus. We're one of the fastest growing economies in the country. We're going to see more growth in the next 30 years than we've seen in the last 75. And the greatest threat to our economic trajectory is housing. We have underbuilt across America, and certainly in Columbus, since before the Great Recession. And that issue has just compounded over the last 14 years. We're 200,000 units short in Central Ohio. Most estimates have us nationally underbuilt by about 3 to 4 million. And that supply crisis is forcing rents to go up faster than folks' incomes and making the entranceway to buying homes out of reach for so many Americans who are working harder and making more money than they ever have before. But this crisis continues to squeeze so many people. And so one of the first things we did in Columbus was rewrite our zoning code. First time in 70 years. So Columbus was we're knocking on 1 million people now in the city limits.
It's a massive undertaking. Everyone wants to get their 2 cents worth in.
There are lots of former mayors around America who tried to rewrite their zoning code, operative word former. And so this is hard. It's difficult. And oftentimes where the real gnashing of teeth takes place because you're impacting people's biggest investments, one of the biggest assets they have in their lives. And the zoning code historically has been used as a way, it was kind of the next chapter, similar Jim Crow and black laws to, post-Reconstruction and slavery, redlining. Then zoning codes were weaponized and used to keep certain people out. And restricted covenants and all those types of things around land use policy. So it's critically important that we rewrote that. And we've just recently done a survey. Over 100 mayors have participated from across the country, and many of them have already acted in that way because land use is critically important. We know density and height are the greatest contributors to affordability. What we figured out the last 30 years in America is sprawl is not a strategy, and we need to build and develop differently. This is going to be my focus as long as I'm president, and I think an issue, whether you live in the South, the North, the East, and the West, whether you live in a big city or a mid-sized city or a small town, housing is one of the biggest issues facing America right now, and we believe that it requires a federal response.
Penultimate question is a question about best practices disguised as a fun fact. So the fun fact is that Columbus is a Midwest pickleball haven. And Tyler Buchanan, my Axios local colleague, tells me that in one of your State of the City addresses, you called for an expansion of additional courts. And Tyler asks, when you're mayor, fads come and go. How do you decide when to capitalize and pursue a project when there's a sudden explosion of popularity?
Turns out I work in 4-year contract periods. And I learned a long time ago, I'm in the addition business, not the subtraction business. when those 4-year contracts come up. So there's a movement across the country, and certainly in Columbus, and a very passionate. And I was really surprised how diverse the movement was. When I first started hearing about pickleball, I'll tell you a funny story. So I was doing a budget rollout on the Near East Side at Driving Park Recreation Center, predominantly African-American community, and rolled in and got ready to do it. And there were several men sitting in the lobby not looking excited to see me. And I thought, well, clearly they didn't get in the budget. I'm going to have to figure this out. No, my press conference was disrupting their weekly pickleball league. And I got an earful about pickleball.
And priorities.
Yes. That was an operating budget announcement. Needless to say, when the capital budget came out a couple of months later, pickleball was a priority based on the input and direction of those men. I also directed the staff to never schedule press conferences during pickleball leagues around the city anymore.
Word of the wise. Last question. We always finish with one fun thing. And Monday, you might have heard, is a big day. Martin Luther King Jr., important holiday. Inauguration, might have heard. Opening day of Davos. And
IO.
College football championship. Your Buckeyes will be the heavy record favorite over Notre Dame.
No, we're just trying to make our way. There's a very talented team in South Bend, and they're led by a Buckeye and Coach Marcus Freeman. Never underestimate a great Buckeye.
So this is like somebody trying to set expectations before a debate.
You never thought you were going to be in the spin room for college football out here, did you? No, we're excited. It's the first time in 10 years. We surprised my daughter after the Texas game that we're going to go down to Atlanta for it. And I have done my community proud. I have brainwashed another young person into becoming an avid, rabid Buckeye fan, and she is very, very excited.
In addition to reading Axios Atlanta, what are you excited to do in Atlanta?
Well, Mayor Andre Dickens is a great mayor, and I'm thrilled.
You're on message. No wonder you're president.
He gave us a long list. And so I think it would be only fitting. My wife nor my daughter have ever been to the Carter Center, so I think we're going to swing by there. But
amazing.
My daughter's also probably going to extract that College Football Hall of Fame out of me if I'm dragging her to the Carter Center.
Fair is fair. We thank the U.S. Conference of Mayors, the voice of America's mayors in Washington since 1932. Thank J.P. Morgan Chase for this great partnership. We're grateful to you. Thank the Axios Events team and Mayor Ginther. Thanks for a great conversation.
Thank you, Mike.
Appreciate you. Thanks.
Introducing our View from the Top moderator and Axios' publisher, Nicholas Johnston.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. As my good friend Tim Barry said at the top, this is the start of something really big for us at Axios. A Zoom-in series on navigating city challenges powered by our great friends J.P. Morgan Chase, and it's great to have the U.S. Conference of Mayors as a partner helping with all of this. Now, nothing we do at Axios is possible without the support of our partners. All the investments we've made, particularly in local journalism across the country, is thanks to that. We're in 30 cities around the United States, soon to be 34. If we're in your town, I hope you're a reader. If we're not in your town, come find me afterwards. Let's find a way where we can hire local journalists in your community and continue to work together. And so on that note, I want to thank J.P. Morgan Chase for making this possible. Welcome to this stage with J.P. Morgan Chase Vice Chairman Peter Scheer and Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan. Mr. Mayor and Peter, come on up. Welcome to the Axios stage. How are you?
Good to see you, Nick.
Welcome. You two have a good story. A 13-year, at least like
Most of which we can
11
talk
year
about publicly.
partnership. Well, let's see how much we can talk about publicly here. More than a 10-year partnership between the city and JP Morgan Chase. Let's start at the beginning. How did this happen?
So I got my boss, Jamie Dimon, who has many brilliant ideas, generally mostly sane ideas, called me in sort of late summer 2013. Detroit had just, as Tim mentioned, entered bankruptcy, largest municipal bankruptcy in the history. And he said, why don't you go out to Detroit and see how we could help? And it took me a minute to make sure this was serious. I wasn't being punked. And the fact is, if you looked at the national headlines at the time, it was not a pretty picture. The bankruptcy, city was completely dysfunctional. Ambulances wouldn't show up, buses wouldn't show up. The unemployment rate, I think, was about 24%. But when you got there, there was election. My first visit there, the election campaign was going on when the mayor was first running, and we saw this candidate actually talking about bringing people together and partnership and collaboration. We got inspired, and so we spent, even before he took office, we spent about 6 months on the ground thinking about ways in which we might help support the city's recovery. And then he actually tells a better story of how it actually...
Mr. Mayor, what's your line on this? Some guy from New York shows up thinking you know how to fix it?
Well, it is. So I had just been elected, and it was a pretty unusual campaign, but when a white guy runs in an 83% African-American city, everybody assumed that I had no chance, and I won by a pretty good margin. But what I had won after the election was a city already in bankruptcy, probably $20 billion in debt. Half the street lights were out. The ambulances didn't show up for an hour. And I'm trying to figure out how to sort this out. I haven't taken office yet. My assistant comes in and interrupts a meeting, which is unusual, and she says, Jamie Dimon's on the phone. And I said, that's funny. There's a guy at JP Morgan with the same name. And she said, I think it's him. I said, I didn't think Jamie Dimon knew who I was. So I pick up the phone. I recognize the voice. He says, Mike, I think America's turned its back on Detroit for far too many years. And I want to reverse that. I want to have this fella, Peter Scheer, come see. I think we can invest $50 million to get going. Well, that's nice, because Detroit, we feel like manufacturing left, state government left, federal government left. It was an unusual call. And then Peter did come to town, and our first meeting wasn't, hey, send me a check and go away. I said, I could use your expertise on our mortgage problems to get these vacant houses, and I could use your expertise on the small business loans because I got these vacant storefronts. I could use your expertise on the workforce because we got to get our folks working. And Peter hasn't been able to leave for the last 12 years.
Yeah, and by
the start of a beautiful friendship.
by the time I left that meeting, the $50 million became $100 million. So funny how that works.
I mean, let's leave aside a pretty passable Jamie Dimon impersonation you started off there at the start. Get in a little bit more into those specifics. So, you had a laundry list at the beginning. How did you begin to implement that? How did you begin to move the needle on those topics?
So it started with, and Peter came in and showed me a plan. And then I took his paper, I put it aside, and I said, let me show you where we need you to be. But we had a problem right out of the gate. We had 47,000 abandoned houses in the city. People had bailed on the city. 200,000 people had left in a decade. But a lot of those houses were solid brick homes. And I had this idea I could sell them on the internet. And people could fix them up. But of course, no bank would give a mortgage, to somebody to fix up a house in Detroit. And the very first thing they did was set up a partnership that made loans to start that. Today, 15,000 houses that were abandoned a decade ago now have been fixed up and have families in them, and they helped us get that ball rolling.
And one of the important things I would say about our partnership is sometimes you go to a city and the mayors or powers that be will say, well, just give me a check and I'll figure out how to spend it, and we kind of run away when that happens. And the mayor will say, help me figure out how to fix this problem. And if there are things that can be done better outside City Hall than inside City Hall, it was all just how do you actually fix the problem? How do you work with partners, local partners? Look, JP Morgan can't go into Detroit or any other city and say, hey, we're the guys from Wall Street, we're going to tell you how to fix the problems. But when you have the right players working together on the ground, that's where we can really help support and influence, both with resources, but also our just technology and intellectual expertise.
Well, this is like a little bit here. Like, I think, Mayor, you've talked about this. It's like, it's not just cutting a check. It's literally like it's getting on the plan and it's going there and it's figuring out what the pieces of that puzzle are.
Yeah, and one of the things we created, I mean, the mayor has said, I mean, he's always said, yes, he'll take the financial investment, but we would put, one of the things we created out of this was something called the Detroit Service Corps. We would actually send not just volunteers in, but we would send business people in, finance people, technology people, strategy people to work with different agencies to try to solve problems. He would often take them to Tigers games when they were in town. These are people who would literally come from all over the world who work for JP Morgan Chase to say, we're going to go into Detroit and work with agencies that the mayor identified or nonprofits to try to help them solve a problem.
Let's stick with housing. Oh, go ahead, Mr.
So I just want to say, this is you would think in a city like Detroit coming out of the housing crisis, embracing Jamie Dimon might be politically problematic. But in the city of Detroit, our residents are so deeply appreciative of somebody who shows up when others are turning away. But I'll give you an example of how personal it got. And there was times when Peter was telling me about new restaurants that opened in Detroit before I knew. It was amazing how they were in. But we had a chance to land a 5,000 employee Jeep assembly plant. And I had a handshake with Fiat Chrysler, except I had this huge piece of a parcel of land that I had acquired that we could park the cars on. But it had a railroad right-of-way running down it. It hadn't been used in 30 years.
Right.
I couldn't get the damn railroad to sell us the right-of-way at any price. And I was down to my last 30 days. I was about to lose 5,000 jobs. And the local company said, sorry, it's over our heads. Our national leadership in New York makes this decision. You're going to have to get them to do it. I pick up the phone and I call Peter. And I said, do you and Jamie know the CEO of the trade? He says, yeah, they're our clients, the railroad. And so I said, I need them to sell me this. 24 hours later, I get a phone call from the local person. You SOB, you had Jamie Dimon call our CEO. They turned the train track over to us, and we have 5,000 jobs. Their commitment has been so far beyond money. It's been a personal partnership.
It was even worse. We actually pulled the CEO off the golf course. It was a Friday night. He called me. We pulled the CEO off the golf course on Sunday, and it's like, you got to fix this problem.
That is a hell of a relationship banking, right?
Yes.
I joke with the mayor. I learned his signals. We were talking about different signals. I knew when someone from his office called and said the mayor wants something. It's okay. It's probably not. If he didn't want to call, sometimes he would text. Don't tell our lawyers. But then when he called on a Friday afternoon. I was like, okay, something's going down. So you sort of learn the urgent signals.
But this gets back to what you were saying. It's not about like showing up and just dropping a check and then getting back to the airport. It's that ongoing relationship to solve problems.
Yeah, and we can't solve everything. There's not a lot we can do, but we have learned a lot. Heather Higginbottom's sitting in the back of our room who runs all our policy and insights. We've learned a lot about what works, right? And we can apply that and the willingness to actually work in partnership with, and I think the mayor's attitude is, I'm going to work with anyone who wants to help me solve a problem. I'm not going to get into ideological litmus tests or anything like that.
That's the way mayors work.
Well,
right?
yes, you would hope. Mostly. I actually, one thing is, I hope at some point some of the people who actually serve in Washington would take some lessons from how mayors work, because I think we get a lot more done in this town.
So we talked about housing, which is a huge issue. I know there's another massive issue, which Mike and the mayor talked about before, just like education and workforce development. Where did that fit on your list? What were the
so again,
solutions
this is where a partnership goes beyond it. When you're at a 20% unemployment rate, and you've got a lot of folks in our town who had a high school degree and wanted to work hard, wanted to get skills, what do we do? They actually commissioned a study of what was going on, and their report, I read it and I'm like, duh, I've lived here my whole life, but what it showed was that the high-end jobs were in the city and suburbanites were driving in, and the middle-skill jobs were in the suburbs at the different smaller factories and and Detroiters were driving out. Literally every day, we were passing each other on the road until I got jobs in the city. that Detroiters could be trained to do. We weren't going to change things. And their report helped us set up a whole workforce where we then sourced for every company people who wanted jobs, and we started filling them. But every time Jamie would come to town, I said, look, I love your report, but you guys need to move a call center here. Tell me why you can't have a call center in Detroit. I got all this vacant space. Put a call center in Detroit and hire Detroiters. Jamie finally got so tired of me saying, when are you going to do this, that he told Peter to solve it. But these guys, he'll tell you what they did. They didn't go get a call center. They came up with a whole different
How did you solve it?
So the mayor's he was less polite in the call. He would bang on us every time. you got to move a call center. And like we would look at this and try and listen. One of the things they said from the beginning, they're not interested in charity. They want to create sustainable business.
Not just a check,
right?
Not
just a check, not charity. And we tried very hard to see how we can make the numbers work on a call center. And I know this will sound shocking coming from an executive at J.P. Morgan Chase. We did realize that some jobs after COVID could be done from home. Don't please no one tell Jamie I said that. And we actually, after COVID, we were looking at this and said, well, what if we actually tried hiring some people from home to do call center jobs? These are jobs that usually you bring people in the office, they sit in front of a computer taking calls. And so we finally got agreement from the business to hire 30 people. We're going to test this out.
Right.
I called the mayor. I said, listen, here's what we're going to try. That was a Thursday night. So Detroit at Work, which was the agency that he created, within like probably a week, they had produced for us 250 very qualified resumes of people. So even though we started at 30, we actually hired they committed to 30. We hired 50. We saw very quickly that not only were these calls among some of the highest quality calls, because these are not happy calls. These are not people calling saying, hey, we just want to tell you how much we love Chase. These are people saying there's something screwed up in my account or my debit card didn't work. So you need like some finesse and skill
It's a hard
to handle
job.
these are hard jobs. The net approval, the sort of customer satisfaction scores were 97%. Okay, and they were cheaper. So what we haven't actually announced publicly yet is what we thought were 30. By the end of this year, will be 150 people in Detroit, or the Detroit call center. Probably doing 1.5 million, 2 million calls a year. And what I would say to other mayors,
And what are they making?
oh, they're making now probably $27, $28 an hour, full medical benefits, and they love it. I mean, and hopefully some of them will actually move into other jobs. We've replicated it in Baltimore with Governor Wes Moore and Brandon Scott, and we've just announced we're going to do one in Atlanta. So these are, I mean, listen, the overall message from this experience is there's a lot of talent sitting in these cities, and if we can start breaking down some of these barriers to opportunity, they're amazing things. And by the way, we're making money off these call centers. This is not like
not charity.
This is not charity at all. By the way, I shouldn't, in case I don't have a chance, our deposits in Detroit, the mayor said people like J.P. Morgan Chase have gone up by over $20 billion since we've done this. And listen, I think people like us. The economy's growing, and that's good for us.
So before we get the hook here, would you mention like the replicability of that is moving to other cities? This partnership like this, for folks in the room who are thinking about like, I've got challenges in my city, like what are the lessons they can take, aside from calling Jamie Dimon and getting to take care of it, what are you think lessons they can learn from this kind of partnership?
I had to make it politically able for Jamie Dimon and a bank to come into the city of Detroit. It was my responsibility to make sure they came in a way that was sensitive. It wasn't hard. They were intuitively there. They invested in affordable housing. They invested in African-American and Latino-owned businesses. They came in a good way, but I knew they had struck gold when we have these community meetings. 300, 400 people come out every quarter to tell me all the things I'm doing wrong. And there is a 90-year-old woman, well-known in Detroit, known as Mother Bernice, who will whack you with her umbrella if she doesn't think you're doing well. She stood up at one of the meetings, and I thought she was going to complain about something I was doing in an alley in her neighborhood. And she said, do you realize what Chase has done? Everybody in this church should go out and move their account to Chase. And I said, wow, this is the community speaking, and this is what happens when you get a good corporate partner.
Well, I would say we were talking about this earlier. Listen, there are banks are not universally loved. I hate to break the news, late breaking news. And we have a lot of, we monitor social media. And at one point, this was a few years ago, I said, there's probably 10 or 15% people who just don't like the fact that you're working with a bank like ours. And he says, yeah, but there's like 85 or 90% who do. And like you can't be held captive to that. And I find, and Tom has seen this over many years, the most effective mayors are the ones who are saying, I'm going to fix the problem. I'm not going to worry about, whether people like this. Is not a social club or a popularity contest. We're going to go in and figure out how best to fix the problem.
I mean, that comes back to the whole angle on mayors. It's the problem solvers. There's Republicans, there's Democrats and mayors. And America now says, let's find someone to fix the problem. Whoever that problem is, if the problem gets fixed, that's the win.
Yeah.
Before we get the hook, let's end on one fun thing. You're a DC guy, spend a lot of time in Detroit. What's your favorite part about going? What great restaurants have you told the mayor he needs?
Well, we told actually, the New York Times just listed Detroit as one of the 52 places to visit. So there's a lot. I was going to say one of the favorite things I used to love doing was go to Detroit Lions games.
We'll get to that.
The mayor's taken me to 2 over the years, and the Lions have lost both times. So Sunday night after the Tampa Bay, where they came in and he texted me just to make sure I would be nowhere near the city of Detroit on Saturday night.
You are not coming to cheer for the Washington Commanders at our stadium. Yes.
All right, well, here we go. One football thing for the road. Make your picks. You're a DC town. Commanders are on fire. Lions are good, though.
We've waited 60 years for that. Commanders have only waited 30 years. It's our turn.
Peter, you going to go against that?
I am incredibly proud of what the Commanders have accomplished, and I think it's going to be an amazing game Saturday night.
That's the way the banker's going to answer that one.
Peter
Duggan,
Daniels.
thank you so much for being here. Huge thanks for JP Morgan Chase for powering today. Huge thanks to the Youngest Conference of Mayors for partnering with us with this. Thanks so much. See you out on the road, and stick around. The conversation continues.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage Axios economics reporter Courtney Brown.
Hello. As the voice of God said, I'm Courtney Brown, economics reporter at Axios. I'm so excited to welcome to the stage Mayor Daniel Rickenman. He's the mayor of Columbia, South Carolina. Okay. I heard, or read rather, a lot about your background. It is insane. So you were a restaurateur. You started a renewable energy company. You also started a spirits business, Forbidden Bourbon.
Yeah.
I feel
so
like
I'm completely insane. So I'm perfectly fitted to be a mayor.
It's just a lot of different jobs. If there are any young people in the room, if you haven't figured out what you're going to do yet, Mayor Rickenman is an example that you'll figure it out. The other thing I want to say before we talk about more serious stuff, I also heard a rumor that you are a certified Bojangles biscuit maker.
Pizza maker.
Pizza maker.
Yeah.
Ben & Jerry's ice cream scooper.
Correct.
All very useful skills that I'm sure help you run.
You notice
your
everything's
city.
around food, right?
Oh, yes, I've noticed that. So Axios reported earlier this morning about a report that the Chamber of Commerce came out with this morning talking about, what will the state of American business look like in 2025? And their big takeaway is that the focus is going to be on state and local politics, and that policy is local. And there's a lot of talk about the federal government, what happens here in DC, but really it's people like you who help create change in the nation. What do you think about that?
I think that, at the local level is where everything happens. You think about it, it affects your family, your business, your house, everything about it is localized. So investing there is where it grows. We have this theory that we're open for business. We made that part of our stance. We're open for business. How do we make it easy for people to start a business? And I can say, we are averaging around 1,100 new business license applications annually right now. And 78% of our new businesses have been women-owned businesses. And coming out of the COVID and using the tools that we have in our city to promote those small businesses. So yeah, it's where it happens, because local businesses, they grow there, they give back, and they hire. So that's our growth pattern, is how do we continue, and then how do we figure out the gap? What is the gap that helps our small businesses grow? So if we're recruiting businesses, make sure that they complement and they help our small businesses.
That's a good segue to my next question, which is just, you spend a lot of time outside of the country. You've traveled to interesting places, Germany, Accra, is that right? You go to Accra? It's cool. Why? Why do you leave the city? Why do you feel the need to travel abroad?
Well, part of it is I'm first generation American, so I do have a lot of ties overseas. But secondly is that's part of, my parents came to the U.S. to fill the gap. There was a businessman named Roger Milliken. Some of you may have heard of Milliken & Co. Research. Mr. Milliken invested heavily into the chamber at the time and said, hey, we got to fill these gaps. If we want our community, our textile and our chemical community to grow, we need to fill gaps. Well, it's the same process. The way we're looking at it. So take advantage of our sister cities that we've created. How do we create a parallel path where we not only through education, look, we're blessed with 6 colleges and universities. I have over 60,000 college students there. We have the #1 international master's business program there. Got 2 HBCUs, and then I have the largest training base on the East Coast, where 7 out of 10 military families are choosing to stay in Columbia, South Carolina as they retire. So I've got a whole nother class of folks that can fill gaps in growing business. So how do we tie all those pieces together? Mm-hmm. And so traveling and bringing those new ideas and bringing those companies to be the launch pad. Everybody wants to be in the Southeast right now. We see that happening. We're the second fastest growing state. We're seeing record enrollment in our universities, but we're also seeing businesses incubate. Mm. And it's a great little story. So we had some college students who created a company around quantum. They went to MIT. They were one of 2 schools from the Southeast. These young gentlemen got 3rd place in the hackathon. They started a quantum fund. They've raised over $25 million. We put them on the road this summer to tell their story. Why? Because their story was about they couldn't have done what they did had they not been in Columbia, because of the mentors, the colleges, and the network of these small entrepreneurs there that helped them along the way. Mm. So when you tie all those pieces and you recruit, we're growing worldwide, and that's what our goal is, because we have a very large international community as well.
So when you go abroad and you talk about everything that Columbia has to offer, does it work?
Absolutely. Especially in Europe, because Europeans, what is the favorite thing that they like to do? They like to be outdoors. Mm-hmm. They like to ski. They like to be in the water. They like to hike. Well, guess what? 10 out of 12 months of the year, you can be outside. We use it as a recruiting tool for police officers, too. We sent pizzas last year to the 3 coldest cities in America during the winter with a video that says, you could be playing golf today, guys. Come on down. We'll pay for you to move. Same concept is drawing those businesses, but showing them for their employees, quality of life is probably one of the most important things. We also have invested in ourselves internally into our employees. but doing things like we're one of 40 cities that's LEED certified, gold LEED certified, the only one in South Carolina. Why is that important? Because today businesses are very concerned about the future. Well, we also tied that into one of our biggest economic engines in South Carolina, which is outdoor sports, hunting, fishing, golfing. Well, who wants to conserve land and worried about the environment more than anybody else? Those folks who want to continue to do that. So it's pulling it all together and sharing that story, and that's what people want. They want the real story. Today, transparency and understanding the stories are so important. Even in business, we started our bourbon company, which was with the first female master distiller in Kentucky. Well, what do people want to know most about? Where are our ingredients from? What makes us different? Where do we distill? How do we store? How is the process? It's very important for people to know the genuine story behind it. So we're doing the same thing.
Okay, so all policy is local. Everything happens at the local level. You said that Columbia is open for business. What happens when there is a message being sent from the federal level that America is not necessarily open for business? Things like the Nippon Steel, U.S. Steel deal getting blocked. Japan's an ally, right? Do you think about that when you're traveling abroad and trying to attract companies to invest in your city?
I don't worry about the federal, and I tell people that all the time. First of all, we're over 250 years old. We're not going anywhere. Administrations come and go. But the one message people understand, and we say this at the U.S. Conference of Mayors all the time, mayors get it done. And so it is the most important part is having that one-on-one, because we can get it done. We control the policies local. We can help people usher. A business came to us and said, hey, we want to make a big investment, but we got to have permitting within 35 days. All right, we'll make it happen. You get everybody on board. You can't do that at other levels of government. So that is a message that people like, the one-on-one and you working together, because everything's localized. I've only got to cobble 6 more votes together to get anything done. I'm not getting 400 and something votes.
Yeah. So we were talking backstage about how much you take away from this conference. And I want you to tell people about some of the ways you've created relationships with other mayors, and that's helped you kind of think about policy in your own city. Just because I heard there are going to be a lot of new mayors this time. What should they do while they're here?
Be involved. Get involved as much as possible. My predecessor, Steve Benjamin, was the past president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. And right when I got elected, the first thing he said, you got to go to the meeting in January no matter what. Literally just got sworn in. I'm here, and made sure that I networked all the way around and got to know folks. Well, just in that first weekend, I had cards from mayors all over that I could pick up the phone and call and share ideas. Mayor Hancock, for give you a great example, from Denver, just finished doing a traffic calming study in neighborhoods, which is one of the big complaints. And I was kind of talking about some of these issues that I heard on the campaign trail. And he said, call me next week. Shared their traffic study with us, saved us a lot of money, time, and effort, because in the meat of it was, here's some things to try. Being able to pick up the phone and talk to friends like Andre Dickens. All of us are in different political stance. It doesn't mean it is an organization that creates opportunities that nobody else can. And the best part of it is the relationships that you have with these mayors from all over. We see each other and we get excited to see each other. But we get so much information shared because it's very hard. I can't go sit down with my staff or my city manager or a council member and have the same conversation that I can have with a mayor because they're not in my shoes. Because at the end of the day, everything good you get credit for and everything bad you get credit for. So, we're fighting every day for 1%. But having that knowledge and the opportunities to share ideas and meet people, make connections, and learn from each other's mistakes is invaluable. You cannot put a dollar. I've probably saved more money. I've had more opportunities to get more grants than I ever had before. We just got $204 million on a rail elimination grant. We just got awarded last week. Yes, y'all can clap for that. That's a good thing. But we we applied 6 different times to the Chrissy, the Mega, the infrastructure. Well, guess who was one of the folks that helped us get through that? former mayor of New Orleans, Mitch Landau, walked us through he said, hey, let's get with the staff. Let's go through and figure out what's wrong here, and here's how you can enhance this. That just doesn't happen. You know, we first got elected, got to spend some time at the White House. There were 10 mayors, one-on-one with the secretaries, telling us how we can utilize them. And the folks that are the most active were the former mayors. You had Marjorie Fudge, you had Marty Walsh, you had Pete Buttigieg, all, thank you Pete for the $204 million, by the way, all of those folks giving us access, but it's because they could relate to what we were doing.
Yeah, this conversation came about because I was like, what is it you do here? So it's good to know that you all are getting to know one another and it's actually making an impact in your cities. Before I let you go, I'm an economics reporter, so I'm going to get some economic story out of you if I can. When you talk to people in your city, businesses in your city, what are they worried about and what are they excited about?
I'll start with the excited part because I think, it's interesting. Columbia, South Carolina has been the capital city, but was kind of the Eeyore of the state. We kind of doubted ourselves. What they're excited about is that we've dove in and took in our competitive reports and actually gone after and addressed the issues. Some people happy, some people not, but addressing issues, making those decisions that are best for the whole community. And people are excited about that because we're seeing record investment, because it is easy to do business. We changed the processes. Not only did we listen to our business community, but we listened to our employees, because we found out a lot of the reason why things were getting bogged down in the system is because of our own ordinances and our own rules internally, so changing those. I think most people today are worried about the future, really understanding, well, where are we going to be with interest rates and everything else, because that's keeping us from getting hotels that we need desperately. We're a capital city that gets 16 million visitors a year, and we don't have enough hotel rooms. It's constantly, how do we change that, and what does the future look like from a regulation standpoint? And I say that for things like we've been struggling with PFAS. We own the water company, and $4 trillion is the level that they're looking at, which would equal to about 10 drops in the Hollywood Bowl. But it would cost my constituents $170 million just to treat it. How do we work together to solve problems, making sure that we're giving the most quality, but don't put it on the backs of us, put it on the backs of the folks who created those chemicals, who did that without penalizing people that are at a lower level.
We're out of time, but since we started this conversation with how many different jobs you've had, I'm wondering, is this the best one or the worst one? How would you rate
I'm going
this
to tell
job?
you that getting up every day being a mayor of a city is the greatest job ever. And I'm going to tell you, every day we're solving problems. I wake up energized, so excited to go to work, get to meet with my constituents. I run into people in the grocery store, whatever, but you just see the collaboration. You get to see things happen in folds. You're not waiting years to have it. And I'll tell you what, it's such a great job. So I got a call earlier. A senator was calling me, and so I answered the phone. And he's like, hey, he was calling me about a constituent issue. I'm like, well, why is a constituent calling you? And he goes, well, I said the same thing. And their response was, I didn't want to start up as high as the mayor. So that tells you what a great job we have.
All right, Mayor Rickman, everyone. Thank you so much, Mayor, for joining us. I'm going to hang out up here. We have another great guest, our final guest. I'll welcome her to the Axios stage. She's a policymaker from Texas's 15th Congressional District. Please welcome Congresswoman Monica De La Cruz. Thank you, Congresswoman. I don't think I'll ever forget what district you represent, because someone on your staff told me that there's a nickname for your district. So what is it and what's the backstory?
Well, I have the honor of representing Deep South Texas, and that is the area on the north end that begins to be in between San Antonio and Austin, and then travels straight down to the border to McAllen, Texas. And we affectionately call it the Fajita District. And so I represent the Fajita District, and I'm very proud of that. We have a lot of great barbecues down in Deep South Texas, and great fajitas too.
You won a second term in November. First Latina, first Republican to represent the district. But I want to go back to 2022. What is it that you think shifted in your district that helped flip it red?
Well, again, it's such an honor. And you talk about first, I'm also the first Hispanic female to serve a full term for the great state of Texas. So a really, really big accomplishment. And what an imprint that we have, not only on our community, but on the state, but on the national level as well. So you ask, what is the shift down there? You have to remember, I represent a Hispanic district. We are over 80% Hispanic. In fact, we have the largest Hispanic Republican district in the entire nation, right on the border. So the things that mattered most to the hardworking South Texans was, number one, securing the border. That was the first and top issue. The second was the economy. Hispanics tend to have larger families, and that means more mouths to feed. Those of you who go to the grocery store know it's not cheap. So the economy really mattered as well. And of course, there was lots of families like my grandparents who came over so that their great-grandchildren could realize the American dream, and keeping that intact was also really important.
Yeah, I feel like given the district that you represent and where it's situated, we should talk about border security. I mean, what should the Trump administration do on that front? And I'm curious how involved you personally expect to be on any related border security legislation.
I started in the last Congress, that was the 118th Congress, and right away began working on H.R. 2, which was the Secure the Border Act. I sat at the table with then Speaker McCarthy to tell him about what really mattered along the border. I have a very close relationship to the Border Patrol Union. In fact, South Texas, the Rio Grande Valley, we have one of the largest Border Patrol sectors in the entire nation. And we've had at times some of the largest illegal immigration come through our nation in our sector. So I come with a lot of experience and background. That being said, H.R. 2 brought some fundamental things that I believe will bring back in the Trump administration. Number one, it has to do with policy. And what that is making sure that we end the catch and release program. Number two, start the Remain in Mexico program. Look at infrastructure. But you know what is also lacking? Is technology for Border Patrol agents. You wouldn't believe, but they actually share cars where some of their agents will go to the border and another group of agents who started their shift, they cannot even get into a car to go to the border to protect our borders because all of the cars are in maintenance. They don't have enough in technology infrastructure, not only to keep Americans safe, but the agents safe and the immigrants safe. Because down in South Texas, we don't get snow like here. We have 110-degree weather. So you have mothers who are trying to migrate across that are pregnant, 9 months in 100-degree weather, putting their lives at risk. There's a lot of work to be done in that space.
I think zooming out a bit, out of your district and more at the national level, just the broader conversation about immigration right now, there's a lot of warnings from economists, a lot of the sources that I speak to, that the demographic tailwind is no longer at America's back and worker shortages are going to be the new normal. So how do you think about that tension? How do you shape immigration policy but also make sure that we're still able to attract talent from across the globe?
Well, first, we have amazing talent right here in the United States. I have 2 kids. I have a 17, 18-year-old right about to get into college. And I am just amazed at what our youth, and you know what? I'm inspired and hopeful for our young Americans and what they bring to the table. But I am also compassionate to the needs of our different industries, such as agriculture. In South Texas, we have one of the largest agriculture areas in the nation, where we have citrus that is quite large, specialty grains. Why do I bring that up? Because they depend on H-2A workers, and they need those people who are going to come with working visas to help them harvest. And make no mistake, food security is national security. So we must make sure that our farmers and ranchers have the hands that they need to bring the food to our local grocery stores. So it's an important topic and one that I will be part of.
So how do you interact with the mayors around Texas, ones that are around or in your district? How do you communicate with them, and how do they help inform what you want to do in Washington?
That's a great question. And in fact, I have a purple district. It is really 50% Democrat, 50% Republican. And of course, I'm the first female, the first Republican in this district. They didn't quite know what to do with me yet. So when I first got elected, everyone just kind of stood in their chair like, what's she gonna do? Is she gonna be too far this way, too far that way? Oh, I'm not from her party. Is she gonna represent me? So the first thing I did for several months was I would have a phone tree every single week. Myself, my chief, we would call all the mayors and all the judges. It didn't matter what side of the aisle you were on. About 2 months in, my Hidalgo County judge, he's a Democrat, he says, Monica, he said, you have called me so much. He goes, I don't think I've heard from a congresswoman or congressman as much as I've heard from you in the last 2 months. He goes, you don't have to call me this much. And I said, I just want you to know, Judge, that I am with you. If you need something, I'm going to be here for you. So it was a matter of being able to build those relationships, and took some time and work, but the work is paid off. Now everybody sees that I'm not red, I'm not blue, I'm red, white, and blue. And that's what I was elected to do.
One of the big issues that you focus on, and is an issue in your district and quite frankly around the country, as the mayor of Columbus said, is housing and affordability, or the lack thereof. And I'd love to hear what the barriers are as far as allowing your constituents to make that step into buying a home.
So as I mentioned, my district is right on the border. We have a blue-collar, hardworking district, over 80% Hispanic. Our median income is $50,000. That's tough for many, many families. So affordable housing, HUD housing, is extremely important. And that's why I'm so glad to have been chosen as a vice chair for housing and insurance, because this space is so important, not just to my district, but to all Americans. So you ask, how do we connect, right? The local to Washington, D.C., because there is a disconnect. Number one, interest rates, which I heard were mentioned earlier, inflation, those are two things that must be brought under control in order to help make housing a reality.
But that's kind of out of your control, isn't it? I mean, interest rates, what can you do about that? I mean, the Fed is cutting rates, short-term rates, and long-term rates, which affect mortgage rates, are still going up. That's weird. So what can you do about that,
While we do value the Fed's independence, which we do, we cannot neglect what Congress has done when it comes to spending to spur the Fed's actions. So it comes down to spending. We all know that DC has a spending problem, and that's why there's so much focus on reconciliation, on budgeting, making sure that we cut out waste and abuse so that we can bring down inflation, bring down interest rates, so that we can make housing more affordable to all Americans.
You were a former insurance agent, you were telling me, backstage, 15 years, right?
20 plus years.
20
yes,
plus
altogether.
years. Wow, okay. Obviously, the story in Los Angeles is about fatalities and the homes and the lives that have been upended and damaged or destroyed as a result of the fires. But like, there is this overstory, if you will, about insurance and the business of insurance. And there were a bunch of insurers pulling out of California. And I wonder how you think this event will impact insurance in the years to come.
Well, first, I must say that there may be some mayors from California, and my heart goes out to all of those families and children who have suffered tremendously from the fires, and the brave firefighters from all across the country, including my district, who went to California to support our fellow Americans. Devastating, absolutely devastating. I have over 20 years in insurance experience, specifically in property and casualty. What I learned, although I must give this disclaimer, insurance is actually regulated by the state. So the state of Texas insurance laws are different from the California insurance laws. So I don't want anybody to think I know California insurance laws by any means.
Sure.
But what I do know is this. Insurance is about managing risk and helping the everyday American manage their risk but become whole or as close to whole when they suffer a loss. And with the companies that I worked with, they knew their risk. They have models that have been perfected over many, many years to determine what is a high risk. And when it's a high risk, they will charge a premium price for that high risk. So what I'm hearing from what you're saying, insurance companies pulled out either before or after because there was a high risk. Tragically, we're seeing that the insurance companies were correct in modeling it to be a high risk because we see the fire, we see the devastation. So how can we help the everyday American? And that is by deregulation. We see that regulation is what's killing businesses, it's killing Americans. And when we talk about housing, there are things. Let me just tell you this. When it comes to the space of housing, in America, we need 1.5 million homes. That's how many homes we need right now. The average cost of a home is $400,000. That's a lot of money. Well, because of rules that have come out of the Biden administration that were supposed to be in making homes more energy efficient, it was going to increase the cost of houses $31,000. It's just so challenging. So looking at rules, looking at regulations, and will ultimately help the average American to get into housing that is affordable.
Got it. We'll have to leave it there, Congresswoman. Thank you so much for joining Axios. I hear we have drinks and cocktails and things that you might need. So stick around for networking and cocktails. And be sure to keep an eye on your inbox for Zoom-in events. We're going to be having them throughout the year. And we hope to see you in your hometowns. Thank you so much for joining Axios.
Yes.